Okay, today's question. I want to fire my waitress, but I just found out that she's pregnant. Does that mean that my hands are tied? And the answer is no, it doesn't mean that at all. But you do have to be careful how you go about it. Here's the deal. A lot of employers are sort of under a misconception that whenever they have an employee with a protected status like pregnancy or a disability, that creates some sort of magical legal shield around them, and that you can't discipline that person and you definitely can't terminate them. And that is not the case whatsoever. You have to remember why discrimination laws were created in the first place. Discrimination laws were created to protect people from discrimination based on something that they either cannot or should not have to change just to have a job. They weren't created to provide some sort of carte blanche job security to people who happen to have a protected status. Every employee, regardless of their status, can be disciplined or terminated for any reason so long as it's not an illegal reason. So while you can't fire your server because she's pregnant, which of course would be an illegal reason, you absolutely can fire her even though she's pregnant. In other words, her pregnancy alone does not tie your hands and make you unable to terminate her. But this is where you have to be careful, because from a lawsuit prevention standpoint, when you are going to terminate a person with a protected status, you have to make sure that you are especially clear about exactly why you're terminating them and that you have documentation to back that up. There is almost nobody who outright tells an employee that they're terminating them for a discriminatory reason. Discrimination cases are built on, number one, the conduct that's leading up to the adverse employment action. So, what was the work performance of that employee? Did they have stellar work performance, or did they have a history of discipline? And then number two, what has happened since that point? So for instance, did you terminate a person who was pregnant and then hire a person to fill that position who had no experience but wasn't pregnant? Those are the types of things that plaintiffs use to build a discrimination case. And so if you're going to be taking any type of adverse employment action, regardless of how justified or non-discriminatory, you want to make sure that you are documenting every incident leading up to you taking that action. So if you're terminating an employee for poor work performance, make sure that every warning is in writing and signed by that employee. The goal is to be able to easily refute any type of allegation of discrimination with objective, clear-cut documentation. And most importantly, make sure that regardless of protected status, that you treat every single employee equally. While pregnancy itself isn't considered a disability, you may have to provide the same type of allowances to women who are temporarily unable to work due to their pregnancy, as you would to any other employee who is temporarily disabled. So for example, if you have a server who breaks their leg, and while their leg is healing, you allow them to work in a seated position as a cashier, you may have to provide some sort of similar accommodation for a pregnant employee. And lastly, remember that if they do have some sort of impairment resulting from their pregnancy, that they may be actually considered disabled, at which point you would have to provide some sort of reasonable accommodation to them to allow them to perform their job absent an undue hardship on your restaurant.